I'm reporting the impeded peace process of the GRP and CPP-NPA. The country has had 7 presidents since the Communist Party of the Philippines was formed in 1968 by Jose Maria Sison, a former student activist and ex-member of the Partido Comunista ng Pilipinas. The CPP-NPA were opposed to the Marcos regime, conducting small-scale raids and ambushes nationwide. Over the years, recruitment also spiked. By the CIA's estimate, the insurgents' ranks more than doubled in size to around 17,000 in the final years of dictatorship. The Communist Party of the Philippines New People's Army seeks to overthrow the Philippine government in favor of a new state led by the working class and to expel U.S. influence from the Philippines. The Communist Party of the Philippines was founded in 1968 and its armed wing, the New People's Army, was founded in the following year because the party and its armed wing are so closely intertwined. They are often referred to together as CPP-NPA. In December 1968, Sison met Bernabe Buscaino, another former activist who had commanded an armed group during a communist-led uprising in the 1950s called the Hook Rebellion. Together with Buscaino, who still commanded his armed group, Sison set up the NPA on March 29, 1969, and Buscaino became the NPA's first commander, bringing his fighters into the newly established militant wing. The CPP-NPA was originally based in the city of Capas on the Philippines' largest island, Luzon, and it began with 60 combatants and 35 rifles. Although it clashed with government forces, the CPP-NPA initially concentrated on its own growth and strengthening its support among the peasantry, with party activists working to rally peasants to its cause. In the term paper, we will be sending all the other details through the term paper that will be submitted, but the slides will only say the important features. So, in 1973, a commission created by the CPP-NPA founded the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, NDF or NDFP, attempting to unify and coordinate various leftist groups. And one policy was the decentralization of armed operation. Sison directed CPP-NPA units to stay independent of one another, to conduct attacks from mountainous areas, and to limit their offensives to small police and military ambushes. In 1976, the CPP-NPA lost the Chinese government support. On January 17, 1981, Marcos formally ended martial law, thus allowing some political expression by opposition and alleviating pressure on the CPP-NPA. Although Marcos intensified extrajudicial executions and other forms of domestic repressions, the CPP-NPA was able to return to urban areas and form relationships with legal oppositional organizations. In 1987, beginning of peace process between the government and the CPP-NPA-NDF. August to December 1986, preliminary peace talks are conducted between the administration of Corazon Aquino and the CPP-NPA-NDF, but end in the wake of the Mendiola massacre on January 22, 1987, in which 13 farmers were killed and scores injured. Peace negotiations remained at a standstill throughout Aquino's term. In 1986, elections caused major tension within the CPP-NPA when Corazon Aquino, widow of popular oppositional senator who had been assassinated, ran against Marcos. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the CPP-NPA suffered various organizational losses. The Philippine government captured key leaders, and internal purges again resulted in dozens of CPP-NPA members' deaths. In 1987, the peace talk was short-lived and remained in a standstill until the end of term of President Corazon Aquino. 1992, during the term of President Fidel Ramos, he issued amnesty proclamation for the rebels. Negotiations resumed under his term. In September 1, 1992, the Hague Joint Declaration was signed, and Ramos declares a policy of amnesty and reconciliation. Peace talks resumed under the administration. The Philippine military blamed other factors for the resurgence, such as the 1992 repeal of Republic Act No. 1700. The repeal allowed the CPP to become a legal political party, although the group continued to express its opposition to electoral participation. Despite this avowed rejection of legal rather than armed struggle, the CPP-NPA has engaged in peace talks with the Philippine government, usually through the NDF. Even after the 1992 repeal of Republic Act No. 1700, the NDF has continued to represent the CPP-NPA in official talks with the government. 1992, Ramos declares a policy of amnesty and reconciliation. Peace talks resume under his administration. By September 1, 1992, the Hague Joint Declaration of 1992 is signed by the government and the NDF after 2 days of negotiation in Netherlands. President Fidel Ramos issued amnesty proclamation for the rebels. Negotiations resumed under his term in September 1992. And in 1995, the Joint Agreement on Safety and Immunity Guarantee, called JASIG, was signed. March 16, 1998, the Comprehensive Agreement on Respect for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law was signed. In 1999, the NDF terminated the peace talks after the Senate ratified the Visiting Forces Agreement of the administration of President Joseph Estrada in the United States of America. And President Estrada formally approved the implementation of CARHRIHL by signing it as well. Under this agreement, both parties acknowledge that respect for human rights and adherence to the principles of international humanitarian law are necessary to achieve a just and lasting peace. By March 16, 1998, the Comprehensive Agreement to Respect Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law, called the CARHRIHL, is signed by the GRP and the CPP, NPA, NDF peace panels. Among its objectives are for both parties to guarantee the protection of every Filipino's human rights and to confront, remedy, and prevent serious human rights violations, for the government to review the cases of political prisoners, and for a joint monitoring committee to be set up to ensure that the agreement is being implemented. In August 1998, President Estrada formally approved the implementation of CARHRIHL by signing it as well. In 1999, the NTF terminated the peace talks after the Senate ratified the Visiting Forces Agreement of the administration of President Joseph Estrada in the United States of America. February 24, Estrada suspends peace talks and the JASIG takes after 4 military officers, including Brigadier General Victor Obilio, which are abducted by the NPA in 3 separate incidents in Mindanao and Bicol. In May 29, 1999, 2 days after the Senate ratified the Visiting Forces Agreement negotiated by Estrada administration in the U.S., which the NDF deemed a violation of the Philippine sovereignty and constitution, the NDF says it recognizes the government's de facto termination of the peace talks. May 31, 1999, the government formally ends the peace talks and terminates the JASIG. President Loren Macpagal Arroyo from 2001 to 2010. The government and the CPP-NPA hold informal talks and agree to resume formal negotiations the next month. The JASIG is reinstated. 2004, the peace talks broke down again. The CPP-NPA was included in the terrorist list of the government. In March 2001, the government and the CPP-NPA-NDF hold informal talks and agree to resume formal negotiations the next month. In April 27 to 30, 2001, peace talks are resumed in Oslo, Norway. Then in March 28 to April 3, 2004, the second round of formal peace negotiation takes place. The terror designation is still discussed, as is the release of political prisoners. In April 2004, the Joint Monitoring Committee of the CAR-HRIHL is finally formed. And June 22 to 24, the third round of peace talk was held. August 24, peace talks break down again after the U.S. retains the CPP-NPA on its terror list. January 24, 2005, a government monitoring committee for the CAR-GL is created to represent the government in the Joint Monitoring Committee. And during the term of President Benigno Aquino from 2010 to 2016, after a 7-year cessation, formal talks resumed. At the end of the February talks, however, a 22-month impasse begins that leads to the government's ending formal talks in April 2013. February 15 to 21, 2011, the formal talks resumed during the term of President Benigno Aquino III. After a 7-year cessation, the formal talks resumed at the end of February. 22 months impasse begins that leads to the government's ending formal talks in April 2013. President Duterte's term approved a 6-point peace and development agenda that includes an accelerated timeline on the peace talks. June 15 to 16, 2016, the preliminary discussion to resume the peace talks are held in Oslo, Norway, by negotiator Jesus Dureza and former Congressman Ermani Barganza and Dole Secretary Sylvester Bellion. Heading the CPP-NPA-NDF side were Jose Maria Sison, Louis Halandoni, Fidel Agkawili, and 5 others. In July 30, 2016, Duterte lifts the ceasefire after the Reds failed to impose a reciprocal ceasefire and after government militiamen are ambushed in Davao del Norte. August 22 to 26, 2016, formal talks were resumed after a 5-year impasse. And so, in August 21, 2016, the government imposes an indefinite unilateral ceasefire after the CPP-NPA declares a 7-day unilateral ceasefire of its own. In December 8, 2016, Duterte says he had given the NDF too much too soon and that he would not release 130 political prisoners until the NDF signs a bilateral ceasefire deal. He also notes that the NPA has been carrying out small-scale but deadly attacks on companies and facilities. The NDF later says it is willing to sign a bilateral truce. In February 5, 2017, a lookout bulletin is issued for the Tiamsons and other NDF consultants after the talks are scuttled and Duterte ordered them arrested. April 3, 2017, the 4th round of peace talks is conducted in Amsterdam. May 27, 2017, the 5th round of peace talks is suspended following the CPP's call for the NPA to intensely attack on the heels of Duterte's placing Mindanao under martial law due to the conflict in Marawi City. July 21, 2017, after Season says that there is no longer need for peace talks due to the Duterte administration's obsession with martial law and mass murder, the president says the government is ready to engage in war versus the rebels for another 50 years, a reference to his listening to Season talk about the need to wage war. October 5, 2017, Duterte says that he may leave it to the next president to pursue peace talks with the communist rebels. He earlier said that the peace talks were a waste of money. Some days later, however, he indicates that peace talk negotiations might resume, saying that he has to talk to the NPA still. November 22, 2017, the government cancels peace talk with the CPP-NPA NDF. Recent tragic and violent incidents all over the country committed by the communist leaders. December 5, 2017, Duterte signs a proclamation formally designating the CPP-NPA a terrorist group. So, the Philippine forces increased their operation against the organization throughout year 2000 and claimed in 2010 to have drastically reduced its ranks. When Benigno Aquino III assumed the presidency that year, the government again attempted talks with CPP-NPA. However, a ceasefire broken by the CPP-NPA continued fighting and acknowledged human rights violation by both sides have hindered the talks. And season in the Netherlands and the local CPP-NPA leadership has increased due to the former's growing willingness to engage in peace talks and the latter's continued reluctance. So up to now, it's still hanging, and it will be addressed by the new president, Bongbong Marcos. Thank you and good day.